The hospital bracelet felt like a handcuff, cinching tight around my wrist. Across the room, my mother, Victoria Lynn, was already divvying me up. Doctor, the papers for Meiyi's organs are all signed, yes? Her voice sharp as shattered glass. My Jiahao needs that kidney, the liver. He crashed his Porsche, poor darling, drunk, but he's young. The doctor sighed. Mrs. Lynn, the consent is for when... Yes, yes, when she's gone. Victoria cut in, waving a dismissive hand. The point is, Jiahao gets what he needs. Meiyi wouldn't want him to suffer. She's always been so... accommodating. Her eyes, cold and calculating, flicked to me. The antiseptic smell, a harsh chemical burn in my nostrils, was suffocating. It was the sterile scent of my own impending slaughter, a repeat performance I hadn't asked for. Machines beeped a morbid lullaby, counting down my last breaths. Beep, beep. Silence. Beep. A nurse bustled past. Nearly time, dear, she whispered, probably thinking she was being comforting. Your brother is a very lucky young man. Lucky? He was a black hole, and I was the star he was consuming. Rage, a familiar inferno, flooded my chest. Hotter than magma, thicker than congealed blood, it was an old friend, this fury. It had been my companion in the darkness of my first, short life, and it was here again, roaring back with the force of a shattered dam. They thought I was just a collection of organs, a means to an end for their precious Jiahao. Not this time, the inferno seethed. Never again. 23 hours. The red digits on the bedside clock glowed like a malevolent eye, counting down to my scheduled evisceration. 23 hours until they'd wheel me in and carve me up for their golden boy. But here was the kicker, the cosmic joke, the ace up my nearly dead sleeve. This time I remembered. Everything, the whole sordid prequel, every slight, every sacrifice, every bitter end. And with that memory came a cold, hard resolve. This script was getting a rewrite. This was my decisive moment. I would not go gentle into that operating room. My fingers, clumsy and weak, fumbled beneath the thin hospital blanket until they closed around the cool, hard plastic of the burner phone I'd stashed there. A relic of my first life's desperate, failed plans. Now my unexpected ace. A lifeline. A weapon. My one call to rewrite destiny. Victoria, naturally, chose that exact moment to stride back into the room, her own diamond-encrusted phone already pressed to her ear, her voice a strident performance for some unfortunate listener. "Melissa, darling, you simply won't believe the drama!" she boomed, completely oblivious to my clandestine movements. Jiahao, my poor lamb, had a dreadful smash-up in his Porsche. Yes, the new one. Utterly totaled, can you imagine? He's terribly shaken, of course, but he's a fighter, my boy. Such spirit. I could practically hear Melissa's sympathetic clucking from here. And Meiyi, Victoria continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, yet still carrying whisper. Oh, she's being an absolute angel, as usual. So selfless, positively saintly. Ready to give her all for her brother. It's terribly tragic, of course, her prognosis. Terminal, but at least some good will come of it. A silver lining. Jiahao will live. He'll thrive. He was just saying to me, poor boy, tears in his eyes, Mother, I owe Mei everything. She's literally saving my life with her, well, so sweet, isn't he? So aware. I nearly choked. Sweet? Aware? He was aware of his next fix and his next thrill, that's what he was aware of. The rage was a living thing inside me now. Victoria prattled on. The doctors here are marvelous, so efficient, top-notch. They said her organs are a perfect match. A miracle, really. It's almost as if she was designed for this specific purpose. Some people are givers, Melissa, born to serve a higher purpose, and some are simply more important. Jiahao, with his talents, his future, he needs all the support he can get. Meiyi understands that. She always has. Such a good, quiet girl. She paused, listening, then tittered. Oh, the funeral. Terribly morbid to think of it now, but yes, small, private, I think. Very tasteful. We must focus all our energies on Jiahao's recovery. After all, his needs come absolutely first. Always have, always will. My grip tightened on the hidden phone until my knuckles ached. Her words were like individual drops of poison, each syllable a fresh outrage. "You really believe that, don't you, Mother?" I whispered, my voice a dry, barely audible rasp, thankfully lost beneath her booming pronouncements. "You think this story ends the way you've always written it? That I just fade away and he gets to live consequence-free?" A humorless smile touched my lips. "Oh, you have no idea what's coming for you. For both of you. One call, that's all it would take." The number was already a burning brand in my memory, a direct line to a past life's contingency plan. 23 hours? She wouldn't know what hit her in 23 minutes. This time, the phoenix would rise, and it sure as hell wasn't Jiahao. My thumb, surprisingly steady, danced over the cold screen of the burner phone. It was an old number, one I hadn't dared to hope still worked. A ghost from a life I was clawing my way back from. It rang twice, then a click. No greeting, just a faint, expectant silence. James Chen, ever the professional, even on his most private, unlisted line. "James," I whispered, my voice a dry rasp, the effort making the machines beside me hiccup in protest. "It's Mei Yi, Lin Mei Yi." A beat of silence, then. "Mei Yi, I was told you were incapacitated, unreachable." His voice was a low baritone, carefully neutral, but I could hear the gears turning. Good old James, father's most trusted lawyer, the only one who knew about the contingencies. "Change of plans," I breathed. "Listen closely. Execute the trust fund lockdown clause. Authorization code, Phoenix 7, effective immediately." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him accessing a mental vault, dusting off a file he probably thought he'd never need. "Phoenix 7, he repeated, his voice suddenly sharper, a hint of something. Respect? Surprise? Lacing it. "That's a very specific authorization, Mei Yi. Are you absolutely certain? The ramifications are significant." "More certain than I am of my next breath, James," I said, a grim little smile playing on my lips. "Just do it." "And James?" "Yes. Prepare for fireworks, and maybe bring a good suit. You'll be making a house call, or rather a hospital call." "Understood, Mei Yi," he said, the neutrality back, but now underscored with a current of readiness. "Consider it done. I'll be in touch regarding the house call." The line went dead. Phase 1, complete. I let the phone slip from my fingers, a surprising wave of exhaustion washing over me, but beneath it, a fierce, unfamiliar surge of triumph. Let the games begin. The first explosion wasn't long in coming. Not a literal one, more of a high society implosion, which in my mother's world was far more devastating. It happened as I'd gleefully anticipated at the hospital's billing department, a place Victoria Lynn usually sailed through like a queen inspecting her serfs. I wasn't there to witness it firsthand, obviously, still being tethered to my beeping entourage, but the ensuing shockwaves reached my room with satisfying speed. Apparently, Victoria, attempting to prepay for some gold-plated 5-star recovery suite for Jiahao, because only the best for her little sociopath, had presented her onyx black, unlimited everything credit card. The young cashier, bless her probably underpaid and chronically stressed heart, swiped it. Once. Twice. A third time with a confused little frown. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Lin," she'd apparently stammered, already looking terrified. "This card, it seems to be declined." Declined? Victoria Lynn did not do declined. The word wasn't in her vocabulary except when applied to lesser mortals. I could picture her face, that carefully constructed mask of aristocratic boredom cracking, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shooting towards her hairline. "Declined?" she would have echoed, her voice probably dropping several degrees in temperature. "That's preposterous. Run it again, you incompetent girl. There must be a mistake with your machine." I've tried, ma'am," the cashier squeaked, no doubt wishing the floor would swallow her whole. "It says insufficient funds." Insufficient funds? The sheer, unadulterated outrage in that imagined shriek was music to my dying ears. Oh, to have been a fly on that perspex barrier. Victoria probably demanded to see a manager, then the hospital director, then quite possibly the Pope, convinced it was all a vast conspiracy to inconvenience her. She likely tried another card, then another, each one meeting the same ignominious fate. The Lin family accounts, meticulously drained and locked down by Phoenix 7, were now drier than a forgotten martini. It took less than 10 minutes for Hurricane Victoria to tear through the hospital corridors and burst into my room, her face no longer white, but a rather fetching shade of puce that clashed spectacularly with her jade green blouse. Her hair, usually an immovable helmet of perfection, had actual strands escaping. She looked frazzled. It was a good look on her. For once. "What?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous, grabbing my shoulders with a grip that surprisingly still had some steel in it. "Did you do?" Her expensive perfume couldn't quite mask the acrid scent of her panic. Her eyes, usually so adept at conveying icy disdain, were now wide with a sort of horrified bewilderment. It was like watching a predator realize it had just stepped into a very well-hidden trap. I let my head loll on the pillow, offering her what I hoped was a beatific, if slightly deathly, smile. The effort was monumental, but the payoff was worth every ounce of energy. "Why, Mother?" I rasped, my voice thin but clear enough to carry the carefully weighted words. "Whatever do you mean? I'm just lying here, being the dutiful dying daughter you always wanted." My eyes fluttered closed, then open again, focusing on her apoplectic face. "As for your little financial hiccup, I simply gave you exactly what you chose, Mother. You made your bed, now you get to lie in it, a dying daughter, and, as of approximately 30 minutes ago, a spectacularly broke family. Enjoy the view from rock bottom. I hear it's character building." Just as Victoria looked ready to either throttle me or have a full-blown gilded cage meltdown, the door swooshed open again. This time, it wasn't a harried nurse or a furious matriarch. It was James Chen, looking impeccably dapper in a dark gray suit that probably cost more than my last 3 years of medical care combined. He carried a sleek leather briefcase like it was an extension of his own formidable will. "Mrs. Lin," James said, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the charged atmosphere like a well-honed knife. "I believe this is a private family matter. Perhaps you'd like to discuss it somewhere other than your daughter's critical care room." He didn't wait for an answer, just smoothly positioned himself between Victoria and my bed, a polite but immovable barrier. Victoria whirled on him, her fury momentarily redirected. "James, what is the meaning of this? My accounts are frozen. My cards are useless. This insolent child," she spat the words, gesturing wildly at me, "has done something. You're my lawyer, fix it." James's expression remained serenely professional, though I thought I saw a flicker of something almost amused in his eyes. "Actually, Mrs. Lin," he said, placing his briefcase on the small side table with a decisive click, "while I have advised the Lin family on various matters in this specific instance, concerning the primary inheritance trust established by the late Mr. Lin Sr., my fiduciary duty has always been and remains to Miss Lin Mei." He opened the briefcase, revealing a sheaf of documents. "Your husband, madam, was a man of considerable foresight. He put certain safeguards in place." "Safeguards?" Victoria scoffed, though a sliver of unease was now creeping into her voice. "What are you talking about? The family assets are managed through me, for Jiahao's benefit." "Not entirely," James corrected gently, holding up a rather official-looking document sealed with a formidable red wax emblem. "This, Mrs. Lin, is the original trust charter. It stipulates quite clearly that full controlling interest of the primary assets, including all liquid funds and property holdings, was to remain under a protected guardianship until Lin Mei reached the age of 25, or, in the event of her severe incapacitation or imminent demise, could be transferred to her direct authorization via a pre-agreed failsafe, a failsafe codenamed, as it happens, Phoenix 7. He looked at me then, a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Miss Lin invoked that clause today. The inheritance, Victoria, was always, ultimately, hers to control. You were merely the steward, and it appears your stewardship has been found wanting." Victoria stared at the document, then at James, then at me, her face a kaleidoscope of disbelief, rage, and dawning horror. But that's impossible. The business, Jiahao's future." "All currently on hold, I'm afraid," James said, not sounding afraid at all. "Pending Miss Lin's further instructions." The digital clock on the wall, the one that had been my tormentor, now felt like an ally. 22 o'clock. 22 hours until they expected me on the operating table, ready to be carved up like a Sunday roast. 22 hours for Victoria to absorb the shock that her gilded cage had just lost its bars and its bottom. 22 hours for her to realize that her designated spare parts daughter was now holding all the cards, all the cash, and all the power. The rage was still there, a simmering coal in my chest, but now it was accompanied by a cold, clear sense of purpose. This wasn't just about stopping them, it was about dismantling their entire rotten empire, piece by piece. And I was just getting started. The news from the Lin family mansion, was delivered to me via a series of increasingly frantic and frankly hilarious text messages from a former maid who still felt a sliver of loyalty. Or perhaps just enjoyed drama as much as I did. Apparently, the grand marble foyer, usually a silent testament to obscene wealth and questionable taste, was now echoing with a symphony of discord. The lead vocalist, my dearest brother, Lin Jiahao, whose panicked screams, she reported, were hitting notes previously unknown to human science. The percussion section, a delightful troupe of rather insistent gentlemen creditors by the sound of it, who were, and I quote, pounding on the 20-foot oak doors like they were trying to tenderize a whale. "They're going to break it down, Miss Miyi," one text shrieked, followed by a string of terrified emojis. Young Master Jia Hao is under the grand piano, screaming about his artistic temperament being violated by Philistines. Tell him his artistic temperament is about to meet a repossession order. I'd texted back, a smirk playing on my lips. I could just picture it. Jia Hao, the self-proclaimed misunderstood genius, whose only masterpieces were mountains of debt and a string of crashed sports cars finally facing the music. A loud, angry, door-pounding kind of music. Mrs. Lin is on the phone screaming at someone about incompetent security and breach of contract. Another update informed me. She says their credit is golden, and this is all a temporary misunderstanding. Oh, darling mother, so slow on the uptake. The only thing golden about her credit right now was its spectacular, fiery demise. The text painted a vivid picture. Jia Hao wailing, Victoria alternately screeching into her phone and at the beleaguered household staff, and the creditors outside roaring about overdue payments on everything from Jia Hao's custom-built gaming rigs to Victoria's bi-weekly Botox deliveries. It was, in a word, beautiful. The best part? This was all happening while I was comfortably ensconced in a plush suite at a private clinic James had spirited me away to. Ostensibly for continued observation, but mostly, I suspected, to keep me out of Victoria's immediate, hysterical reach. And, of course, to make sure no overzealous surgeons try to harvest me now that the hospital bill was, shall we say, significantly in arrears. The wheelchair, a sleek, modern contraption James had also procured, was a temporary necessity due to my weakened state, but it also served as a rather effective throne from which to observe the unfolding chaos. It took less than a day for Victoria to track me down. She must have pulled some serious strings, or perhaps James, with a subtle nudge from me, allowed the accidental leak of my location. She arrived looking like she'd wrestled a badger and lost. Her usually immaculate Chanel suit was rumpled, a coffee stain bloomed on one lapel, and her hair had achieved a level of disarray I previously thought only attainable by surviving a Category 5 hurricane. The desperate, hunted look in her eyes, however, was brand new, and I savored it like a fine wine. She didn't grandstand, she didn't demand. She actually knelt. Right there on the polished wood floor of my temporary sanctuary, her designer knees probably screaming in protest, she knelt beside my wheelchair. The mighty Victoria Lin brought to her knees. It was a sight I'd replayed in my dreams for 2 lifetimes. "Mei Yi," she began, her voice raspy, stripped of its usual imperious tone. It was an act, of course, every bit of it, but the desperation underpinning it was deliciously real. "Mei Yi, my dear girl, you have to listen to me. We need to be reasonable about this. This lockdown, it's madness." "Reasonable, mother?" I asked, my voice calm, a stark contrast to her barely contained panic. I tilted my head, feigning mild curiosity. Was it reasonable to sign away my organs while I was lying helpless in a hospital bed? Was it reasonable to bankrupt the family for Jiahao's extravagances, then expect me to be the final payment? That was different, she insisted, her hands reaching out, then hesitating before settling on my arm. Her touch was surprisingly cold, or maybe it was just the ice in my own veins. That was about saving your brother, about family. You can't let your brother die, Mei. Your family, she cried, her voice cracking with artfully feigned emotion. Theatrics, always with the theatrics. He's your blood. He needs his medication, his treatments. Without funds, without our resources, he'll fade away. Is that what you want? His death on your conscience? Her eyes, those masterful pools of manipulation, welled with crocodile tears. Think of all the years, Mei Yi, all the memories we share. He loves you, in his own way. He always has. He's just misguided sometimes. She squeezed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You wouldn't do that to him. You couldn't. You're not cruel, Mei Yi. I know you're not. This is just a tantrum, a cry for attention. But it's gone too far. You need to stop this. For Jia Hao, for the family name, for me. Family? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I gently removed her hand from my arm, my own touch deliberately light, almost dismissive. That's a fascinating choice of word, Mother, coming from you. I let a small, humorless smile touch my lips. Let's talk about family, shall we? Is family the unit that decides one child is expendable for the sake of the other? Is family where one child is groomed as a sacrificial lamb from birth, her only purpose to cater to the whims and absorb the colossal screw-ups of the designated golden child? I paused, letting my words hang in the air. Because if that's your definition, then yes, by all means, let's talk about how you, dear mother, chose him over me. Not once, but twice now. Once in my last life, which you so conveniently don't remember, and once just a few days ago when you were so eager to sign those organ donation forms. So please spare me the lecture on familial duty. You wrote the textbook on how little it means when it inconveniences you or your precious Jia Hao. He's sick. He needs help. You're being selfish, Victoria shrieked, the carefully constructed facade of the sorrowful mother shattering into a million furious pieces. So much for the kneeling and begging. Her face contorted, the mask slipping to reveal the familiar grasping avarice beneath. He has issues, Mei Yi, real diagnosable issues. His addictions, his impulsiveness, it's not his fault. He's a victim of his own sensitive nature. He needs professional care, constant support, understanding, not this cruelty. She was on her feet now, pacing the room like a caged tigress, her voice rising with every accusation. And you, cutting him off, cutting us off. It's vindictive, it's petty. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us suffer. After everything we've given you, a home, an education, a name? A name you were perfectly happy to let die with me, I interjected, my voice still quiet, a stark contrast to her screeching. This is about your jealousy of Jia Hao, isn't it? She snarled, whirling back to face me. You've always resented him, his talent, the attention he received. You were the quiet one, the plain one, always in his shadow, and now you think you can finally have your moment by destroying him? Actually, Mother, I said, my tone deceptively mild. He's doing a fine job of destroying himself. I merely removed the safety net. Your safety net, to be precise. The one woven from my inheritance and my future. I'm being exactly what you taught me to be, I stated, my voice resonating with a chilling calm that seemed to unnerve her more than any shout could. I watched the accusation die in her eyes, replaced by a flicker of stunned confusion. You were an excellent teacher, Mother, truly. Lesson 1. Sentiment is a weakness. Lesson 2. Always secure your own interests first because no one else will. Lesson 3, and this was your specialty. Use any leverage, any emotional blackmail, any tool at your disposal to get what you want. I gestured around the luxurious suite James had arranged. I learned. I adapted. You wanted me to be strong, didn't you? You always said the world eats the weak. Well, I'm not weak anymore. I'm just applying your principles. You wanted a daughter who understood the value of power? Congratulations, you have one. Her mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time in my memory, Victoria Lynn seemed genuinely speechless. The reveal, if you could call it that, wasn't a hidden secret, but the unveiled truth of her own creation staring back at her, a mirror reflecting her own distorted values. She had sown the wind, and now she was reaping a daughter who wielded the whirlwind with terrifying precision. You, you wouldn't dare, she finally stammered, but the conviction was gone from her voice. Oh, mother, I sighed, a hint of theatrical weariness in my tone. Another trick learned from her. That's where you're mistaken. Daring is my new favorite pastime. You should try it sometime, though I suspect your current financial predicament might limit the opportunities. The late afternoon sun, a fiery orange ball, blazed through the suite's panoramic crystal windows, setting the dust motes dancing in its brilliant shafts. It should have felt warm, comforting even. But where Victoria stood, a shadow seemed to fall, and when her hand, trembling slightly now, reached for mine again, her touch was a shock of pure, unadulterated ice. It wasn't just the temperature of her skin. It was the chill of a bond so irrevocably broken, so utterly devoid of warmth, that it felt like a premonition of the grave she'd so eagerly prepared for me. I pulled my hand away, not sharply, but with a finality that brooked no argument. The queen was deposed, her reign of emotional tyranny over. The only thing left was to watch the pieces of her shattered kingdom fall. And I had a front row seat in a very comfortable wheelchair. A few days after Victoria's rather undignified exit from my temporary sanctuary, days filled with the quiet hum of medical equipment, the rustle of James Chen's legal documents, and the increasingly satisfying schadenfreude of news snippets detailing the Lin family's spectacular fall from grace, James arranged for a more formal meeting. He'd secured a temporary office suite for me, a veritable fortress of mahogany and hushed efficiency, complete with a view of the city that seemed to underscore my newfound, albeit physically restricted, power. I was parked in my wheelchair at one end of a vast, gleaming mahogany desk that could have hosted a state dinner, James seated opposite me, his expression unreadable. "There's something else, Mayi," he began, his voice a low rumble that cut through the quiet. He slid a slim, unassuming file folder across the polished surface. It stopped directly in front of me. No dramatic flair, just a simple, deadly offering. "Something your father tasked me with investigating many years ago, under the strictest confidence. He had his suspicions, it seems, but lacked concrete proof. Or perhaps the will to confront what he might find. After his passing, the investigation lay dormant. Until you invoked Phoenix 7. That clause, Mei Yi, unlocked more than just financial controls, it reactivated certain dormant inquiries." My fingers, still a little weak but surprisingly steady, reached for the folder. Inside, nestled among crisp, official-looking papers, was a laboratory report. A DNA analysis. My eyes scanned the technical jargon, then landed on the conclusion. A single sentence printed in stark, unequivocal black ink. My breath hitched. The room, which a moment before had felt spacious, suddenly seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and heavy. Lin Jiahao, my beloved sociopathic Porsche-crashing brother, the golden heir apparent to the Lin dynasty, was not my father's biological son. "Well, I'll be damned," I whispered, a slow, incredulous smile spreading across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just been handed the keys to the entire abattoir. "So, the golden boy has a little rust under his guilt, does he?" I looked up at James, whose face remained impassive, a perfect lawyerly mask. "Whose, then? Any ideas who the biodad is? A disgruntled stable boy? The milkman? Please tell me it's someone deliciously déclassé." James allowed himself a small, dry cough. "The paternity is inconclusive in that the other party is not identified in this report. Your father's sample was cross-referenced with Lin Jiahao's. The result is a 0% probability of paternity. Victoria, it would appear, indulged in a significant indiscretion." "Indiscretion?" I snorted, tapping the report. "James, this isn't an indiscretion. This is a tactical nuclear strike on the entire Lin legacy. For 25 years, she's passed him off as Dad's son, as the rightful heir. All those years of her crowing about his Lin blood, his Lin destiny. What a magnificent hypocritical farce. The rage I felt was cold now, a sharp, focused icicle piercing through the lingering weakness of my body. It was exhilarating. And Dad suspected, but he never acted? He was a proud man, Mei, James said quietly. And I believe, a man who, despite everything, may have found it difficult to dismantle his own family, however flawed. He documented his suspicions, authorized the initial discreet inquiries, and set up the mechanism for the truth to surface if certain conditions were met. Conditions you have now fulfilled. He left the ultimate decision on how to proceed to you. He paused. The report is ironclad, the chain of custody for the samples impeccable. It's admissible. Admissible for what exactly? I mused, though 1,000 deliciously destructive possibilities were already blooming in my mind. Public humiliation? A really awkward family dinner? Or perhaps something a little more impactful? My gaze drifted to the window, to the glittering, oblivious city below. Victoria had built her entire world, Jiahao's entire future, on this colossal lie. And I, Lin Mei, the disposable daughter, the inconvenient afterthought, was about to pull the pin. Impactful indeed, James confirmed, seamlessly picking up my train of thought. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping another confidential notch. Though we were the only two souls in this soundproofed corporate area, there's a rather pressing timeline to consider. Lin Corporation. The board is convening in precisely 24 hours for an emergency vote on company succession. My eyebrows shot up. Succession? Don't tell me they're actually considering anointing King Jiahao I, ruler of all he surveys, despite his recent public image problems and the small matter of the family fortune having evaporated? Even for the notoriously sycophantic Lincorp board, that seemed a stretch. Victoria has been persuasive, James said, a hint of distaste in his tone. Even with the current financial chaos, she's been leveraging old loyalties, making promises I suspect she can no longer keep, and painting Jiahao as the wronged victim of a temporary liquidity crisis and a vindictive sibling rivalry. She's pushing hard for him to be named interim CEO to stabilize the company during this unfortunate period. Stabilize? I scoffed. Jiahao couldn't stabilize a three-legged stool with a spirit level and a team of engineers. He'd run Lin Corporation into the ground before lunchtime on his first day, probably by trying to acquire a failing K-pop band or investing heavily in artisanal dog food for unicorns. I tapped the DNA report again. And this board, these paragons of corporate governance, they're all set to hand the keys to the kingdom to a pampered, talentless fraud who isn't even a legitimate Lin? Oh, this is just too good. They are unaware of this information, of course, James stated. Currently, Jiahao is, in their eyes, the only male Lin heir, however. Unsuitable he may appear to some. Your father's original succession plan was always rather vague on specifics beyond primogeniture, a point Victoria has exploited. Many on the board are old guard, loyal to your father's memory, and susceptible to Victoria's manipulations regarding family legacy. Family legacy, I mused, savoring the irony until it was almost a physical taste. A legacy built on lies, propped up by my inheritance, and soon to be captained by a bastard. It's almost poetic. I looked at James, my mind racing. 24 hours, that's not much time to stage a coup, but it's plenty of time to detonate a bomb. Who's on this board, James? Who are the key players? Who owes Victoria favors? And who secretly despises her enough to relish this particular brand of chaos? James, ever prepared, produced another slim file. A full dossier on each board member, their allegiances, known debts, and potential vulnerabilities. I took the liberty of highlighting those most likely to be swayed and those most likely to be outraged. Outraged is good, I said, a predatory gleam in my eye. Outraged can be highly motivational. Victoria thinks she's playing chess, moving her little pawn Jiahao into position. She has no idea I'm about to flip the entire board over and set the pieces on fire. I thought of my uncle, Richard Lin, my father's younger brother, a man whose ambition was only rivaled by his thinly veiled contempt for Victoria and her coddled son. He was a powerful voice on that board. Uncle Richard, I said aloud. He's going to have a field day with this, isn't he? James nodded. Richard Lynn is indeed a pivotal figure. He has long harbored his own ambitions for the CEO position. This information would undoubtedly provide him with significant leverage. Leverage. I repeated. Yes, but this isn't just about him or his ambition. This is about truth and about burning down a house built on a rotten foundation. The pieces were clicking into place, a beautiful, intricate mosaic of destruction. The board meeting was the stage. The DNA report was the script. And I was about to direct the hell out of this tragicomedy. My fingers hovered over the sleek black phone on the desk. Not the burner this time, but a secure line James had installed. There was no hesitation, no tremor of doubt. The path ahead was crystal clear, paved with the rubble of Victoria's lies. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, though the thought of my mother's face when this news broke was a delicious amuse-bouche. This was about justice, about reclaiming a truth that had been buried for a quarter of a century. It was about honoring my father's memory, not by preserving the facade he may have reluctantly tolerated, but by exposing the cancer that had been eating away at his legacy from within. "Who are you calling, Mei?" James asked, his voice carefully neutral, though I detected a current of anticipation. He knew me well enough by now to understand that when I moved decisively. "A little bird," I said, a cryptic smile playing on my lips. "Someone who appreciates a good story, especially one with a truly spectacular ending." My finger descended, tapping the first number of a sequence I now knew by heart. Victoria thinks she's fighting for Jiahao's future, for the Lin name. She's about to find out that the name she's been fighting for is a counterfeit and the future she envisioned is a mirage. The line began to ring. One ring, two. "Are you sure about this, Mai?" James asked. One last chance for me to reconsider, to perhaps choose a less incendiary path. "Once this information is out, there's no putting it back. The consequences will be far-reaching for everyone involved." I met his gaze, my own resolve as hard as the diamonds Victoria so casually wore. "James," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. "My mother and brother tried to kill me, stole my inheritance, and built their lives on a bedrock of deceit. Far-reaching consequences are precisely what I'm aiming for. This isn't just about destroying their everything, James. It's about reclaiming my everything. And it starts with exposing the truth, no matter how ugly." The ringing stopped. A voice answered on the other end, clipped and professional. "Lynn Corporation, Richard Lynn's office. How may I direct your call?" "Good morning," I said, my voice smooth as silk, laced with just a hint of the impending storm. "Please tell Mr. Lynn that his niece, Lin Mei, has some rather urgent family business to discuss. Business that will profoundly impact tomorrow's board meeting and the future of the company. Tell him it's about his nephew, Jiahao, and the true meaning of legacy." I leaned back in my wheelchair, a queen surveying her chessboard, ready to make the move that would signal checkmate. The call wouldn't just destroy everything they had built. It would clear the way for me to build something new, something honest, on the ashes of their lies. The Lin Corporation boardroom was exactly as I remembered it, from the few excruciatingly dull occasions Father had insisted I attend meetings. A cavern of polished dark wood, ridiculously high-backed leather chairs, and an air of self-importance so thick you could slice it with one of the heavy crystal water glasses. Today, however, the usual somnolent atmosphere was shattered. Every single one of those high-backed chairs was occupied by a grim-faced board member, their expressions ranging from confused to vaguely apprehensive. They'd been summoned for an emergency session by Richard Lynn, my ambitious uncle, ostensibly to discuss the unforeseen leadership crisis. They had no idea what was about to hit them. James Chen, ever the consummate professional, wheeled me in, parking me at the head of the enormous table, directly opposite where Jiahao would have sat, had he not been, according to my latest intel, still attempting to burrow his way into the mansion's wine cellar to escape the baying creditors. The room fell silent. All eyes were on me, the prodigal invalid, the ghost at their corporate feast. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice amplified slightly by a discreet microphone James had set up. It felt good, this quiet command. "Thank you for attending on such short notice. I know you were expecting to discuss the future leadership of Lin Corporation, and we will. But first, there's a rather pressing matter of paternity, specifically the paternity of the currently proposed CEO candidate, Lin Jiahao. With a nod from me, James tapped a key on a laptop, and the massive presentation screen that usually displayed dreary sales projections flickered to life. There, in stark, undeniable clarity, was the DNA report. Every damning percentage, every irrefutable conclusion, magnified for all to see. A collective gasp sucked the remaining air from the room. Murmurs rippled through the assembled suits like a disturbed hornet's nest. As you can see, I continued, my voice calm and steady, amidst the rising tide of shock, the results are quite conclusive. Lin Jiahao, the boy my mother has presented as my father's heir for the past 25 years, shares absolutely no biological material with the late Lin Jianhong. In layman's terms, gentlemen and ladies, he's a fraud. This, I thought with grim satisfaction, was my second strike, and judging by the faces around the table, it had hit its mark with devastating precision. Uncle Richard's face, usually a carefully controlled mask of shrewd ambition, went through a fascinating series of color changes, starting at a pasty white, progressing through a rather alarming puce, and finally settling on a deep, throbbing purple that matched the veins bulging at his temples. He stared at the screen, then at me, his jaw working silently for a moment, as if searching for words that had fled in terror. When he finally spoke, his voice was a choked rasp. This is an outrage, a fabrication, he spluttered, though his eyes, darting back to the damning percentages on the screen, betrayed a sickening flicker of dawning belief. He'd clearly expected a bombshell from my call, but perhaps not one of this particular dynasty-shattering magnitude. You dare to come in here and slander your own family with such filth? He slammed a fist on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. You vindictive little shrew, he roared, his carefully cultivated composure finally cracking like cheap veneer. The other board members flinched, looking anywhere but at him or me. This is what this is all about, isn't it? Money! You couldn't control Jiahao. You couldn't control your mother, so you concoct this poisonous lie to try and seize the company assets for yourself. You were always a strange, resentful child, lurking in the shadows, jealous of your brother's rightful place. He was playing to the crowd now, trying to paint me as the villain, the usurper. She's trying to destroy us from within, gentlemen, using forgery and slander because her little financial ploy wasn't enough. No, uncle, I replied, my voice a silken thread of steel in the suddenly volatile room. I met his furious gaze without flinching, my hands resting calmly on the arms of my wheelchair. This isn't about money, though I'll admit watching Mother's Amex get declined has been a delightful little bonus. This is about 25 years of lies. 25 years of my mother deceiving my father, deceiving this board, deceiving everyone, all to prop up her precious, illegitimate son. I let my gaze sweep across the stunned faces of the other directors. This is about the truth. A truth my father suspected. A truth he put mechanisms in place to uncover. A truth I am now laying bare before you all. The filth, as you so charmingly put it, Uncle, is not in this report. The filth is in the deception that has been allowed to fester at the heart of this family, and by extension, this company, for far too long. Richard sputtered, his face still a dangerous shade of purple. Your mother made mistakes. Grievous mistakes, perhaps. But Jiahao is still her son. He's still, in essence, if not by blood, your father's chosen successor by her advocacy. Dragging this out into the open, destroying the family business with this kind of scandal. It won't achieve anything but ruin for all of us. He appealed to the other board members, his voice now taking on a tone of desperate reason. Think of the stock prices, the media, the reputation of Lin Corporation. This isn't just a family squabble. This is corporate suicide. We can handle this internally, quietly. There are ways. Settlements. Discretions. He was floundering, trying to find a life raft in a tsunami of scandal. You can't tear down everything your father built just to settle a personal score with Victoria. The business. I cut him off, my voice ringing with a cold, hard clarity that silenced his blustering. was built on my father's blood, Uncle Richard. His actual blood, his sweat, his ingenuity, his vision. It was not built to be a plaything for or a legacy for the product of my mother's infidelity. I leaned forward slightly in my chair, pinning him with a gaze that I hoped conveyed every ounce of my reborn conviction. Lin Corporation is not Victoria Lin's private slush fund, nor is it Lin Jiahao's birthright. It belongs to the shareholders, and its leadership should be determined by merit and legitimate claim, not by deceit and nepotism of the most fraudulent kind. You speak of destroying what my father built? I am trying to save it from being handed over to a charlatan, propped up by a liar. My words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable as the DNA evidence still blazing on the screen behind me. Just as Uncle Richard looked like he might spontaneously combust or attempt to throttle me with his silk tie, the grand boardroom doors burst open with such force that they cannoned back against the paneled walls. And there, framed in the doorway like a tragic heroine in the final act of a very bad opera, was Victoria Lin. Her hair, once a marvel of engineering, was indeed wild, escaping its confines in frantic disarray. Her expensive makeup was a smudged, tear-streaked ruin, revealing the desperate, aging woman beneath the carefully constructed facade. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, fixed on me with a terrifying intensity. "May I?" she shrieked, her voice a raw, ragged sound that scraped at the nerves. She stumbled into the room, a whirlwind of disheveled couture and raw panic. "How could you? How could you do this to us? To Jia Hao? To your own family?" She seemed oblivious to the room full of stunned board members, her entire focus a laser beam of maternal fury and betrayal aimed directly at me. "He's your brother. Whatever the papers say, he's the only brother you've ever known. You're destroying him. You're destroying everything." Several board members actually recoiled as she staggered further into the room, her arms flailing as if to ward off invisible demons, or perhaps just the crushing weight of her own lies finally catching up with her. The late afternoon sun, a molten gold disk sinking towards the city skyline, suddenly blazed through the tall arched windows of the boardroom, setting the room alight with an almost theatrical glow. It cast long, dramatic shadows, painting Victoria's distraught face in harsh relief and glinting off the unshed tears in her eyes. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. James Chen, standing silently beside me, subtly checked his watch. 6 hours. 6 short hours until the board was scheduled to vote on the future of Lin Corporation. 6 hours for this drama to play out, for alliances to shift, for careers to be made or broken. Victoria was still babbling, a torrent of accusations, pleas, and threats, her voice cracking under the strain. Uncle Richard looked like he was mentally drafting his resignation letter, or possibly a homicide defense. The other board members just looked poleaxed. And I felt a strange, almost serene calm settle over me. The storm had well and truly broken. Now, all that was left was to ride it out and see who was still standing when the sun finally set on the Lin dynasty as they knew it. The emergency board meeting reconvened not in the somber, wood-paneled crypt of old, but in the newer, glass-walled conference room on the penthouse floor. It was a fishbowl suspended high above the glittering, indifferent sprawl of the city as dusk bled into night. 12 directors, faces like granite tombstones, were arranged around a sleek, modern table. Uncle Richard, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past few hours, presided, his usual bluster replaced by a grim, almost funereal formality. James Chen, a silent pillar of strength and legal know-how, was beside me, my wheelchair positioned at one end of the table, granting me an unobstructed view of the coming carnage. The air was thick with unspoken anxieties and the faint, lingering scent of Victoria's expensive, panic-infused perfume from her earlier dramatic exit. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice gravelly, "we are here to address the unprecedented situation regarding the leadership and, indeed, the very foundational understanding of the Lin family's involvement in this corporation. We have all seen the evidence presented by Miss Lin Meiyi. Mrs. Victoria Lin has requested an opportunity to address the board." He gestured towards the entrance, and as if on cue, the doors slid open. Mother strode in, or rather, attempted a stride. It It was more of a lurch, a desperate imitation of her former commanding presence. She'd clearly tried to repair the damage. Fresh lipstick slashed unevenly across her lips, her hair hastily repinned. But the wildness in her eyes, the tremor in her hands as she clutched a small crocodile skin clutch, told the real story. She made her way to the podium at the other end of the table, a lone, tragic figure about to play her final losing hand. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was thin and shaky, a pale imitation of its former sharp authority. "Members of the board," she began, her gaze sweeping over their impassive faces. "Trusted colleagues, friends, I stand before you today as a mother, a widow, and someone who has dedicated her life to the success of Lin Corporation, alongside my late, beloved husband, Lin Jianhong." A few of the older board members shifted uncomfortably at the mention of my father's name in this context. There have been allegations, vicious, unfounded allegations designed to smear my family, to tear down everything we have built. Her eyes found mine, burning with a desperate, pleading intensity. "May ye, please?" Her voice cracked, the carefully constructed composure crumbling. "Tell them it's not true. Tell them you're lying about the DNA test. It's a mistake, a terrible, cruel mistake. You're angry, I understand that. You feel wronged. We can sort this out, darling, as a family. Money, shares, whatever you want. Just tell them it's not real. Tell them Jiahao is your father's son. You wouldn't do this to him, to your own brother." She was openly begging now, her facade stripped away, revealing the raw, terrified core. The great Victoria Lin, reduced to this. It was almost pitiful, almost. I met her desperate gaze, my own expression carefully neutral. The hushed expectancy in the room was a tangible thing. Every director leaned forward, hanging on my response. "I'm done lying for you, Mother," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through her ragged pleas. "I've spent a lifetime lying for you, lying to myself, lying to others, covering up for your mistakes, for Jiahao's indiscretions. I covered for the drinking, the drugs, the gambling debts, the car crashes, the endless string of failures you painted as artistic temperament." I took a slow breath. "The lies stop now. The DNA report is accurate. It is irrefutable. And it is only the beginning of the truths that are going to come out tonight." A low murmur swept through the room. Victoria recoiled as if I'd physically struck her. "You're destroying everything your father built," she shrieked, her voice regaining some of its familiar shrillness, her desperation morphing back into fury. "This company was his life's work, his legacy. And you, in your bitterness and jealousy, you're going to tear it all down just to spite me? To spite Jiahao? Don't you understand what a scandal like this will do? The stock will plummet. Our partners will desert us. Years of hard work, generations of effort, all turn to ash because of your tantrum." She gestured wildly towards the board. "Gentlemen, you can't let her do this. This is madness. She's unstable." "He built it for his real daughter, me," I stated, my voice slicing through her tirade with icy precision. "My father built this company with integrity and vision, Mother. He may have tolerated your deceptions for reasons I am only now beginning to understand, but he never intended for his legacy to be handed to a fraud propped up by your lies." I looked around at the board members. The only thing I am destroying here tonight is the fiction that has allowed this family, and by extension, this company, to operate under a false premise for far too long. My father's true legacy deserves better than that. It deserves honesty. It deserves a legitimate heir. "You ungrateful child!" Victoria spat, her face contorted with rage, all pretense of pleading gone. "After everything I've given you, a roof over your head, the best schools, clothes, food, a life of privilege. This is how you repay me? By trying to beggar your own mother? By publicly shaming your brother? By dragging our family name through the mud?" She was trembling from head to toe, her voice hoarse. "I sacrificed everything for you children, for this family. And you were always the difficult one, the sullen one, never appreciating, always judging. Jiahao, at least, has a good heart. He's loving. You have ice in your veins." "You gave me nothing but scraps while you fed him everything," I retorted, my voice still deceptively calm, but with an undertone of steel that made even Victoria flinch. You call what I had a life of privilege? It was a gilded cage, Mother, where I was constantly reminded of my secondary status, my role as the perpetual understudy to your golden boy. The best schools? Yes, so I could be smart enough to understand the depths of your manipulation, but never empowered enough to challenge it. Clothes and food? The bare minimum. While Jia Hao was showered with Porsches and limitless expense accounts for his artistic endeavors, which usually involved trashing hotel rooms or funding some new harebrained scheme. I paused, letting the memories, sharp and bitter, fuel my words. You talk about what you've given me? You gave me a front row seat to your hypocrisy. You taught me that love was conditional, that loyalty was a one-way street, and that my only value was as a potential organ donor or a silent scapegoat. So, no, Mother, I don't have ice in my veins. I have the fire of 2 lifetimes of your neglect and his entitlement, and it's finally burning through the lies. A heavy silence descended, broken only by Victoria's ragged breathing. The board members looked stunned, some even a little pale. Uncle Richard seemed to be carved from stone. Then, with a quiet nod to James, I played my final card. James rose, opened his briefcase, and with deliberate care placed a thick vellum document bound with a faded blue ribbon in the center of the gleaming table. There's one more item for the board's consideration, I announced into the charged silence. My father, Lin Jianhong, was a man of foresight, as James has mentioned. He was also a man who, it seems, understood the true natures of those around him far better than anyone gave him credit for. I pushed the document forward with the tip of my finger. This, ladies and gentlemen, is my father's original, unaltered last will and testament. The one he lodged with his most trusted legal counsel, Mr. Chen, shortly before his untimely death. Perhaps you'll find its contents illuminating, particularly the clauses pertaining to the sole heir of his personal fortune and his controlling shares in Lin Corporation. James added, his voice resonating with quiet authority. I can attest to its authenticity and its legal standing. It was to be enacted under specific circumstances, one of which was any attempt to subvert the true line of succession or mismanage the core family assets, circumstances which, I believe, have been amply demonstrated. The directors stared at the will as if it were a venomous snake. Uncle Richard slowly reached for it, his hand surprisingly steady. The only sound was the faint rustle of ancient paper as he broke the seal. The ensuing vote was almost an anticlimax. After a brief, hushed deliberation, punctuated by the occasional shocked exclamation as the will's contents were absorbed, Richard Lin, his face an unreadable mask, called for the question. The motion was to recognize me, Lin Mei Yi, as the legitimate controlling shareholder as per my father's will, and to instate me as interim chairwoman and CEO, effective immediately, pending a full and formal shareholder confirmation. One by one, the hands went up. Unanimous. Even the directors I knew had been staunch Victoria loyalists seemed to realize the game was up. The lie was too big, the evidence too overwhelming. The corporate seal, a heavy, ornate piece of silver, was retrieved from a safe. Richard, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years, formally passed it across the table. It thudded softly in front of me. My seal. My company. My victory. Victoria watched, her face utterly blank, all the fight finally extinguished, leaving behind nothing but a hollow, defeated shell. They didn't know, of course, as they offered their stilted congratulations and pledged their newfound, if somewhat terrified loyalty, that my plans extended far beyond the confines of Lin Corporation's boardroom. My father's company was safe, reclaimed, but Victoria had other ventures, other assets she thought were hers. Specifically, her boutique pharmaceutical company, Valin Vitality, a vanity project she'd poured money into for years, using it, I suspected, for all sorts of off-book extravagances. It was struggling, over-leveraged, and now, with her primary source of funding definitively cut off, it was ripe for the picking. I'd already instructed James to begin the process of a hostile takeover, using a series of shell corporations. Buying it out from under her, for pennies on the dollar, would be the final, exquisite twist of the knife. She thought she'd lost everything tonight. She had no idea. The real fun was just beginning, The reporter, a sharp woman with eyes that missed nothing and a pen that looked like it could draw blood, leaned forward in her plush chair. We were in my new office, the one that used to be my father's, then briefly, disastrously Victoria's command center. Now it was mine, minimalist and efficient, the city sprawling beneath us like a conquered map. "Miss Lynn," she began, her voice smooth and professional, "the city has been gripped by your family's story. The downfall of your mother, Victoria Lynn, the tragic passing of your brother, Lin Jiahao. There are still so many questions. Regarding your brother specifically, the official cause of death was listed as complications from his accident, kidney failure. But rumors persist that access to vital funds for his continued private care, perhaps even a transplant, was restricted." I took a delicate sip of the imported tea James had thoughtfully provided. My physical recovery had been slow but steady. I still used the wheelchair for longer distances, a subtle reminder of everything I'd endured, but my strength was returning, fueled by something far more potent than physiotherapy. "Rumors are such tiresome things, don't you find, Miss Vance?" I said, my voice equally smooth. "The truth is often far more straightforward, if less sensational." I met her gaze unwavering. "My brother, Lin Jiahao, made a series of unfortunate choices throughout his life. Driving under the influence was one of them. His pre-existing health conditions, exacerbated by his lifestyle and the severity of the crash, were another. He received excellent care, the best that socialized medicine could provide once the, let's call them discretionary family funds, were no longer accessible due to legal entanglements." I paused, letting that sink in. Ultimately, Jiahao died waiting for a kidney that never came. It's a tragic reality for many, Miss Vance. Organs are a scarce resource. Not everyone gets a second chance or a third or a fourth, no matter how much money their mother thinks they're entitled to. Miss Vance scribbled furiously. "Some might call your actions cold, Miss Lynn, given your own medical ordeal and the fact you were once considered a donor for him." A small, almost sad smile touched my lips. Cold? Perhaps. Or perhaps it's simply a reflection of the world my mother created for us. She made it abundantly clear who was valuable and who was expendable. I merely honored her established family hierarchy. Jiahao needed a kidney. So did I, once upon a time, to save his life in our previous, unremembered existence. This time, the circumstances were different. The resources were finite. Choices had to be made. My gaze drifted to the window. He received the standard of care available to any citizen in his condition. No more, no less. Equality can be a harsh mistress when you've lived a life of privilege built on the expectation of sacrificing others. 6 months later. The boardroom where I'd signed the papers for Lin Corporation felt like a distant memory. Today, the setting was a smaller but no less significant legal office. James Chen was at my side, a stack of documents neatly arranged before me. These papers weren't about saving a legacy. They were about burying one. Vlin Vitality, my mother's laughably named pharmaceutical company, her pet project, her monument to ego and dubious wellness products, was about to become mine. Utterly, completely, and for a price that was, frankly, insulting to her, not me. And there she was, a ghost at the feast, watching from a small, cordoned-off public gallery, usually reserved for bored interns or the occasional lost tourist. Victoria Lynn, bankrupt, stripped of her titles, her homes, her influence, alone. Her Chanel was gone, replaced by something off the rack that hung on her diminished frame. Her hair was a dull, lifeless brown, no longer a sculpted helmet of defiance. The only thing that remained were her eyes, burning with an impotent, hollowed-out fury as she watched me pick up the heavy, expensive pen. "Are you ready, Mei Yi?" James asked quietly, his professionalism a comforting constant. "Oh, more than ready, James," I murmured, a genuine smile, this one tasting of pure, unadulterated victory gracing my lips. As my pen hovered over the signature line, Victoria finally cracked. You can't," she croaked from the gallery, her voice barely carrying. "That company, it was mine. It was all I had left. Mei Yi, please, show some mercy. Haven't you taken enough?" A bored-looking security guard near her shifted slightly but didn't intervene. Her pleas were pathetic, irrelevant. Mercy, mother. I didn't even bother to look up. An interesting concept. Is that what you showed me when you were signing my life away for Jia Hao? Or when you chose him, time and time again? I pressed the pen to the paper, my signature flowing smooth and strong. The irony, wouldn't you agree, is rather delicious? For years, I was the one begging for scraps of affection, for a moment of your attention. Now the roles are reversed. You're the one begging, and I'm the one who gets to choose. I finished signing and pushed the documents towards James. She chose her golden child, James. I chose justice. And, as a delightful bonus, a rather promising, if currently mismanaged, pharmaceutical company with some interesting patents I intend to exploit fully. The final act of cleansing. With Velin vitality secured, the last vestige of Victoria's financial independence was gone. She was a nonentity, a footnote in her own disastrous life story. James, ever efficient, had already arranged for her care. A small, forgettable annuity, just enough to keep her from actual starvation, managed by a trust that would ensure she couldn't squander it or use it to cause further trouble. It was more than she deserved, but it amused me to be magnanimous in my utter annihilation of her world. Later that evening, as James and I shared a quiet celebratory dinner, he had a surprisingly excellent single malt. I stuck to sparkling water, the taste of victory being intoxicating enough. He raised his glass. To new beginnings, Mei Yi, and to old scores thoroughly settled. I clinked my glass against his. Indeed, James. To choices. I looked out at the city lights, no longer a symbol of oppression, but a landscape of opportunity. My opportunity. The path had been brutal, the cost immeasurable in some ways. I was no longer the naive girl who had died in that hospital bed in another life. That Mei Yi was gone forever, carved away by betrayal and reborn in fire. This Mei Yi, the one who sat here now, was a survivor, a strategist, a woman who had stared into the abyss of her family's making and had not only refused to fall in, but had dragged her tormentors down with her. My mother had believed blood was paramount, that Jia Hao, her son, was inherently more valuable. She was wrong. Blood doesn't make family, not the kind that matters. It's the choices we make, the loyalties we earn, the love we give and receive that truly define us. She chose her golden child, I chose justice, and in doing so, I finally chose myself. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all.